Okay, fantastic. All right, so welcome to your ninth week of Latin, or I guess 10th week of Latin. We're on lesson 9. I hope that you all have had a great week other than Clint's disappointing season. Other than that, I hope that everyone's doing okay. Um, we have, from now on, your chapters are going to be I'll go back real quickly. From now on, your chapters are going to be part, part review, part new material. So some of these things you may have seen before or heard before, or may not remember them completely, and some things will be totally new. So I just want to encourage you, please do tell me if you want me to stop and go over something again. I'm very happy to do that. If you feel like there's something that you want me to give a few more examples on, or if you're not clear about something, please do not hesitate to ask. If I don't acknowledge you down below, I'm not always looking at the chat box, because if I'm looking at the chat box, then I start reading it, and when I start reading it, I stop talking. So if I don't answer your question, it's probably because I didn't see it. So just retype it for me, but know that I do welcome questions as we're going through the chapters, especially as a lot of this will be new material for you all, okay? So with that said, let's start. We're going to start today with our Latin saying, which is alve atque vale, or in classical Latin, alve atque vale. Because in classical Latin, the V's are pronounced like W's. So in medieval Latin, which is what you all are studying, it's ave atque vale, or in classical Latin, alve atque vale, which means hail and farewell. Alve is kind of their way of saying like hi, so it's like hi and goodbye. And so this one's kind of a sad quote. This is the final words of a poem written by a very famous Roman poet named Catullus. Catullus is quite a humorous poet. He had a lot of love troubles. He had some difficulties with the ladies, and he wrote about it a lot in his poems, talking about women and their fickleness and how hard and difficult women could be. And he's pretty humorous, a little bit. I don't know. I wouldn't let my daughter read him until she was a little older, but he's a good poet nevertheless, and quite clever. But he was contemporary with Virgil, who is a very high-minded poet. Virgil, of course, writing the Aeneid. Catullus is most famous for his poems about love, and he wrote about other subjects as well, mostly about love, though, mostly griping about how his love life never seemed to work out for him. Now, one poem that he wrote concerns the death of his brother, and it is to him that Catullus, when he's standing at the tomb, addresses his brother's tomb with the words "Atque in perpetuum frater ave atque vale," and that means "in forever, brother, hail and farewell." Okay, and so that sculpture down below is Catullus, and it's at his home in southern Italy. So you can kind of see what he looked like there. All right, so that's your quote. Now this quote, you're going to have to know the Latin for your quiz coming up. So make sure that you can spell it correctly, because it's one of those quizzes that you're going to have to type it in. And so do make sure that you can spell the words correctly in Latin. Okay, so just pay attention to that. Now let's look at your new vocabulary. Now, if you have had, or if you're Catholic, or if you've participated in the Catholic Mass, you're probably familiar, or if you just like music, you're probably familiar with Ave Maria, which is quite a famous, not just prayer, but a song in the Catholic Church as well. Ave means Hail Mary, of course. So that comes from this. That use of Ave there comes from that greeting in Latin. Now let's look at your vocabulary this week. We have atque, and in parentheses there I have ac, AC. That's because atque and ac can be used interchangeably. They mean the exact same thing, and they're used for the exact same purpose. The difference between them is only if, let's say, Catullus, for instance, wanted to write a poem and he needed something with 2 syllables to fill out his line, then he would use atque, or if he only needed 1 syllable, he could use ac. So that is merely stylistic. It's whichever the preference is of the poet. So there is no difference. They're used interchangeably. They mean the same thing. and it means and. And we're going to talk about the difference between que, et, and atque in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how to distinguish between them. We have another conjunction, nam. Now the good thing about these conjunctions and adverbs is that, as you know, conjunctions and adverbs never change, and so you're not going to have to learn like any kind of weird declensions or anything. It's no matter where in the sentence, your conjunctions and your adverbs are going to stay the same. There's no declining and no conjugating or changing of the form. So nam means for. Ne, it's a conjunction, means nor or and not. Now, when you see two neckways together, it means neither nor. Neither nor. It's kind of like et. When you see two ets together, it means both and, so it changes meaning slightly when you have them working together in the sentence. Same thing with neckway. Then we have undique, which means from or on all sides. So like when Caesar talks about being attacked on all sides, he would use this adverb undique. Then we have vehementer, which means greatly or violently. What English words can we think of from vehementer? Can you think of any English derivatives? Yes, exactly, Britta and Lydia. Yes, vehement, vehemently. All of these come from this word. So if someone's really vehement about something, it means that they're really forceful. So if I am vehement that we are going to go to the beach this summer, that means I am very forceful in my opinion. So that's where the English word vehement comes from, or vehemently. Yes, Michael, careful, because last time you started hating on cats, if you recall, my PowerPoint featured them. I'm not afraid to give you a catful PowerPoints again. So, then we have ave, which means hail. It's a salute, a respectful salute. Excuse me. A frente, in or from the front. Just as their name sounds, or a tergo, in or from the rear. So when Caesar, for instance, says he's getting attacked from the front, it'd be al frente. When people are coming up behind his legions, and you could say al tergo, which means from the rear. In principio, this is the beginning of the Bible. So in principio, in principio, in the beginning of John, the Gospel of John. In principio means in the beginning. Then we have in secula seculorum. It can mean two things. When it's used, it means, they oftentimes translate it as forever. But what it really means is in world without end, meaning for eternity. It's not just forever like on earth. You usually use this in liturgical liturgical uses, or in church uses when they're talking about like the kingdom of God, which is going to be eternal forever. So in secula seculorum. Then we have prima luce, which literally means at first light, but we call that dawn. Okay, so dawn. All right, any questions about the vocabulary before we move on? Okay. All right, so let's look at a few vocabulary notes. Now, as I promised, that we are going to look at the differences between the ands. So the question should arise is, how do you know when to use et, que, or atque? You use et to connect words or clauses when there's nothing special implied about them. So there's no particular relationship between them. So in this example, Romani et Galli pugnant. The Romans and Gauls are fighting. So there's no special connection between them. We'll look at another example. There is a connection, and I think it'll make sense. You use que to join two things that are similar or parallel in meaning. So we have milites uxores liberosque defendunt. The soldiers defended their wives and children. So they're defending both equally. Okay, so there's no special emphasis giving. Et and que are somewhat interchangeable. Okay, et and que are somewhat interchangeable. For instance, the sentence above where it says the Romans and Gauls are fighting, you could have easily say Romani Gallique pugnant, and that would be fine because there's no special emphasis there given. They're both equal or parallel in their fighting there. Now, atque, on the other hand, is used as to emphasize. It's used to emphasize. So, yes, Abigail, exactly. Going back to that, in the second bullet point, please notice where the que is. We have milites uxores liberosque defendunt. All right, so uxores there is in the accusative, as is liberos. If you notice, the que goes on the end of the second word that's being joined. Okay, so if I were to have vir et uxor, so, and I typed this down below, I have vir et uxor. If I were to write that using the word que, I would say vir uxor que, like that. I would put it on the end of the second word that I'm combining. That's okay, Michael, I understand. Excuse me. Now, et and que, as I mentioned, are interchangeable. Atque is used for emphasis. It's emphasizing the word or the clause that comes after the conjunction, so after the atque. So when Catullus says ave atque vale, he's using that atque to signal that whatever's following the atque has special emphasis. And in this case, since his brother had just died, he's emphasizing the goodbye. So hail and farewell, and so here farewell, since his brother's death, is emphasized. Now, so that's how to distinguish the three versions of and. Now, there's a little idiom that we need to remember, and that's when tribunus is with militum, and militum there, as you can see, is in the genitive plural. It's used to say the military tribune. Our instinctive reaction is to translate the tribune of the soldiers, but really it's the military tribune. It's the more idiomatic way of translating it. So when you come to exercises that have tribunus in any case, and then militum in the genitive plural, because militum is always going to be in the genitive plural in this construction, then please translate it as military tribune. Okay? All right. Any questions about the vocabulary notes before we move on to some more grammar things? Okay. All right. Perfect. Now, if you'd like to follow along, we're going to be in your student text on page 31. You don't have to open up to that because I have everything that you need on the screen here. But if you'd like to follow along, then you're more than welcome to do that. But let's look at some direct quotations. Now, it's important to differentiate between direct and indirect quotations. And I say this because I teach all the upper level Latin classes here at Memoria Press, so I know what's in the Latin feature, and there are different types of quotations. There's direct and indirect quotations. Now, direct ones are, neither of them are particularly difficult, but it's important to be able to distinguish between them when you see them both in English and in Latin. Now, in English, we use quotation marks. We have that nifty punctuation that tells us something's a direct quotation. However, Latin does not have punctuation. So what they would use to show that something is a direct quote from somebody else, they would use the word inquit, and I've put it there in red for you. Now, this word is a defective verb. Defective means that it does not have a full conjugation, so there is no way to say this verb, for instance, in the first person singular. In fact, off the top of my head, the only two forms I can think of for this verb are third person. So we have inquit and inquit. I'm trying to, sorry. And I've put them down below. So there's only third person forms of this. It also can be spelled, it depends upon the book, inquit. But the only forms that there are of this verb are in the third person. Now, the third plural is kind of rare. I've only seen it, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. The third singular is extremely common. And whenever you see the word inquit, think of it as quote marks in Latin. Okay, so they use inquit, which is translated as he, she, said. Now, again, this verb is defective, so there is no perfect or present form. So it can mean either he or she says, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question, Michael. I'll let you, just one second. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, give me just a second, and then, yeah, give me just a second, and then I'll answer that question. That's a good question. Okay, so it's indicating a direct quotation. Inquit is always placed inside the quotation, never before it. So like in English, as Michael's sentence said there, you have the person then said,